Have fun.
Thank you. Michael, welcome to Düsseldorf. Welcome to SpoBiS. Your first time here.
It is, yeah.
Hopefully not the last. We have a full house, as you can see. I can tell you they're not here because of me. I think the expectations are quite high, and there's a natural interest in the company IMG, but also the person, Mike Dolan. So maybe to start off with you personally, you studied literature, started working as a banker, then as a consultant, moved into the snack foods industry, advertising. What makes you the best guy to run IMG?
You know, it's a great question, and it's as you describe it, it sounds like a career based on almost no planning or forethought, which I think there's an element of truth in that. I think what I have done with my career is looked at opportunities as they came along, and looked at the individuals I would work with as part of that, and made decisions about what I would do based upon those factors. So when I was a banker, I left and I became a consultant. I left to join a client of mine, and then I took the opportunity to work in Holland, as we were discussing before, with PepsiCo.
Good move.
Very good move, very good move. And then went back to the States and worked for an ad agency, which reminded me at the time, Young and Rubicam it was, reminded me of my days as a consultant, and sort of a people business, you know, like the one that you're part of, you know, where all of the assets are individuals. You know, as people sometimes say, bankers sometimes say, the assets go up and down the elevator, which you've probably heard before.
Yes.
But the beauty of people-intensive businesses is that it's the spirit, it's the camaraderie, it's the sense of purpose that those companies can produce that really make them so exciting and such fun to be part of. So when a few years ago, I had lunch with Teddy Forsman, who's the owner, was the owner at the time of IMG. As we talked about IMG, it reminded me a lot of that agency world and of the importance of people, the importance of individuals, of giving them an opportunity to do what they want to do and to be successful at it, give them the resources they need to be successful at it, and then basically get out of their way. You know, stand back and get out of the way. A little bit like what you were saying about Maurice earlier. Give people an opportunity to do a good job. Don't micromanage them, but stand back and let them, and the successful ones will just be incredibly successful. So, I have found that kind of element in my career important, the people side of it. And I think especially in a company like IMG, that's something that is very, very critical.
Speaking of critical, when you joined IMG after your lunch with Teddy Forstman, IMG was in a bit of pain. There was quite a push over the leadership. When you arrived, a lot has changed at the company. What have you changed? What has happened?
Well, I think a lot has changed, but I think what we have done is empowered people to be more aggressive. We've really encouraged people not only in the kind of the existing markets where we were, but really to look at new opportunities to grow the business. So we'll talk probably a little bit about some of the things we're doing internationally in the joint ventures. But we've also, in the course of the past few years, built a very, very big business in the United States in the college segment, which is sort of, whenever we talk Americans, whenever we talk to Europeans about the college sports business, people just go, their eyes glaze over, and they don't, it's as if you're talking about some foreign religion, right? It's some bizarre sect. But it's a very, very powerful force in the United States. And, if you look at, the ratings, the TV ratings for the big college football games in the United States, they're just extraordinary. And we have built, over the past 4 to 5 years, probably the most important set of relationships with the top 70 to 80 athletic colleges and universities in the United States.
College football is one of the 5 areas that you basically take the revenues from. Maybe describe the other 4.
Well, that college clearly is the newest and one of the largest. Media would be our media production and rights business, which is a worldwide business run out of London with close to 1,000 people. Is probably the second largest entity in the company. We have as well a fashion business, which is, everyone is always delighted about that. And everyone always thinks it's more exciting than it really is, right? But we have a set of businesses in fashion that range from a modeling agency, the most successful modeling agency in the world, to fashion events like the one in Berlin, which has become, over the past few years, one of the hottest fashion events globally. And we also have a business in fashion which is related to representation of photographers who, in the fashion business, photographers, there's a very close overlap between commercial and artistic. So the quality of what they do is just extraordinary. So that would be a third line of business. We also have what I would call almost the legacy businesses of Mark McCormick, the representation of athletes, and also the events, the management of events or the co-management of events that the athletes appear at. So those are the major building blocks of IMG. It's a very different company now than it was 4 to 5 years ago. It's much less dependent in terms of financial results on the representation of athletes. It's not to say, that is not to say that that's not important. It's very important to us because it's part of the DNA of the company, the sort of the code of the company, and we will always feel that that is a very critical part of IMG, that we represent the best. And whether it's Novak or whether it's the great golfers, we really want to be well represented with the top players in tennis and golf and other sports as well. So those are the main kind of pieces of the puzzle. As I said, it's a very different IMG than it was 4 to 5 years ago. On top of that, we have spent a lot of time over the past 3 to 4 years developing these joint ventures that we have. Excuse me. Would you please don't block the antenna? Oh, I'm blocking the antenna. So we spent a lot of time on the joint ventures that we have in China and India and Turkey and Brazil, and if you want, we can talk a little bit more about that as we go.
Sure. Maybe looking at those 5 business areas, do you expect them to stay the same in terms of revenue split, or do you see certain growth in college and further reduction in representation, for instance?
Well, I think, what we have done is to establish those 4 to 5 major divisions within IMG. And by the way, one of the things that I always point out to people is that when you look at IMG, it really is a unique company because nobody else in the industry, our part of the industry, spans all of those 4 to 5 different categories. They would love to be doing the events that we would do. They love to be involved with Wimbledon. Unfortunately, they can't be. They would love to be involved with the RNA. Unfortunately, they can't be. So, we have the breadth of experience and measured in decades, not in years, but in decades. So I think the opportunity for all of the people who run those businesses is really to look at it as a franchise that they've got and an opportunity to grow. And grow not only in the existing markets where they are, but to look at opportunities to really take the expertise that we've got, particularly expertise in Europe and the United States, and transplant that into some of these new opportunities in the developing parts of the world.
What does it mean in detail when you say we share our expertise, we are the, let's say, the operational and strategic advisors to those asset companies? What do you do?
I was interested in listening to the prior speaker talking about the Bundesliga. And you listen to that, and you listen to the expertise that is built up by people who have run these leagues and run them very successfully. And the intellectual property, that is intellectual property. The fact that someone has the experience to have created a league, to have made it successful, to have 13 million people who go to attend the events, to be measured in revenues that are hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year, that is a piece of intellectual property which has enormous value. And in other parts of the world, what they would love to do is be able to tap into that expertise and to say, okay, why can't we reproduce that in India? We have 1,400,000,000 people. We have a tremendous amount of interest in sports and the development of grassroots sports activities for youth. Why can't we create professional football leagues and basketball leagues and other types of leagues that really pull the expertise that has been developed over decades in Europe and the United States and apply it to these new markets?
How did you get to choose the partners that you have in those growth markets? They tend to be sort of self-made billionaires in each market. Is that coincidence, or is there a certain logic behind your partnerships?
Well, in a way, it is happenstance and in a way, or good fortune. But what we did know was that where we wanted to be, so that we knew that we wanted to be in the growing parts of the world. And there's a great story which I love, which I tell all the time. And I was at a conference a year ago, and one of our partners, Ike Batista, was on a panel like this. And there was someone from Europe. It was in Los Angeles. There was someone from Europe. There was someone from the United States. And the European was talking about how glum everything was in Europe, and Greece was going to go kind of out of the EU.
We're very good at that.
Very good at that. And then the fellow from the United States was almost equally glum about the prospects of the fiscal cliff in the United States and the looming financial disasters. And when it came to Ike said, well, I'm sorry to hear about your problems, basically, but we are doing very well. We in Brazil are doing very well. And he talked about this swath of geography that goes from Brazil through sub-Saharan Africa, through the India subcontinent, Southeast Asia, China, Philippines, and Indonesia. And the point he made was that over the next 10 years, 500 million people in that territory will migrate from poverty to the middle class. And over a subsequent 10 years, another 500 million people will migrate from poverty to the middle class. And as that happens, and as they accumulate discretionary income, they're going to want to spend money on smartphones, on high-definition TVs, on refrigerators, on going to, being able to watch the Bundesliga on pay TV channels. They're going to want all of the things that everybody else in the world wants as well. So I think we knew that swath of territory was where we wanted to be. And then the question became finding the right partner and finding someone whose aims were complementary to our own aims. And I think in that we were just very, very lucky.
And is it fair to say that a country like India is more challenging to achieve that strategy than Brazil, or don't you see
more challenging?
Challenging, yeah.
In what way?
I don't know, commercial setbacks, reliability of timelines. How is the I-League developing, for instance?
Well, I think, you know, if you compare it to the IPL, which we were also involved in the creation of short-form cricket. You know, the cricket played not over 5 days, but played in 3 hours. We were involved in the creation of that concept and that league. That happened in a period of months, maybe 6 months from the origin of it until the league was set up and matches were being played. I think the football has been more difficult to get off the ground, and there have been some pulling and froing back and forth with the existing league in India, the AIFF. I think that has now all been resolved. We have a calendar for when the league will start in 2014, and we have, as you know, a great partner in India, Reliance Industries, which is the largest and most successful conglomerate in India, and we're pushing ahead and expect to launch the league in 2014.
Also, thanks to these initial successes, your revenues have been going up. I read this morning, you don't have to comment, but I read something along the lines of $1.5 billion in overall revenues and about 200 million in EBIT. The company was valued at 2 billion, so that's twice Bayern Munich, to stick with that example. You've mentioned once before that IMG is the holy grail of IPOs. What can you say on that?
Well, I don't know that it's...
Now would be the time, no?
How what?
Now would be the time to exit.
Well, it's not for us to decide. I mean, we are a private company. We're owned by a private equity company, Forsman Little. Teddy Forsman, you know, bought the company some 7 or 8 years ago from the estate of Mark McCormick. So it really is an issue for Forsman Little to determine, you know, what will happen with IMG. I think our duty and our task is really focused on being successful with the business on a day-to-day basis, and that's really where we're trying to keep our attention.
We've seen a number of big names leave IMG recently. Let's say Tiger Woods, Nadal, Federer. What's your response to that? Is it fair to say that that reflects a change in strategy, or is it just coincidence? Were you surprised?
No, and you know, it may seem odd given my comment about how important the representation business is to us, but I don't think it's inconsistent at all. And I think if you look at the hundreds of athletes that we represent in tennis and in golf, you know, I think the way to look at it is almost as a portfolio. So you have, you know, you have new players, you have players that are emerging, and you have the superstars. And I think what often happens with the superstars and with the agents of the superstars who work for us, or presumably they work for us. Sometimes we think they work for us. We're not 100% certain they work for us. But is that there are 3 parties at the table. There's the athlete, there's the agent, who is an employee of IMG, and then there's IMG, the company IMG. And what I have said is it has to work for all 3 parties, so that the economics can't only work for the athlete and the agent. It has to work for the company as well. And sometimes you're able to have a dialogue with the athlete and the agent where that in fact works out. You know, we've had a relationship for 45 years, 50 years with Arnold Palmer and with Jackie Stewart and many, many others as well. In other cases, what you find is that too much of the economics get absorbed by the agent and the athlete. And what we've, at certain points in the case of Tiger and in the case of Roger, just said, look, it doesn't work. It simply, you know, we're not a not-for-profit. We are not a not-for-profit. We're not the Episcopal Church. So we simply can't afford to give you all of the economics. You have to recognize that you know, the workman is worth his wages. And if you don't think so, you should go someplace else. So you know, I think there's a natural turnover that occurs, and I think it's healthy for the portfolio. We would not have gotten Novak if Roger had stayed. I think that was a kind of a critical part of our strategy, where we said that you know, it was time to really part company with Roger, and that opened up the opportunity to have a relationship with Novak.
Another change that one can see in the industry is that many of your customers are in some ways becoming your competitors, and that they're trying to do more things in-house, like selling their assets or representing their own interests. Now you even have exotic firms like energy drinks manufacturers buying rights, promoting sports. What's your view on that, and how do you respond?
Well, I think you know, it always looks easier from the outside, and you always think, and I mean, you're in this business as well, right? In your day job, right? And I was as a consultant, where people think that, well, I can do that. Why don't we do that in-house? Why don't we absorb that in-house? And again, I think it's often illusory that people undervalue what it is that they're getting when they hire an outside firm, and they can't reproduce the expertise, the people expertise that we have or that you have in your own personal firm. Very, very hard to do it, but they think they can do it, and they think that they can avoid a fee by taking it inside. And what they fail to see is the diminution in the quality that really follows from doing it, because it's very, very difficult to reproduce the spirit of these people intense businesses in a production type environment.
Speaking of very, very difficult, let's move to Germany. I think we all bought into the global strategy and expansion of IMG. However, if you match that with the German footprint and also the awareness of the company, I would say it is decreasing. Infront is growing its lead. Sport5 is more visible, particularly in football, as the big brand in the country. How sad does that make you, and what can we expect from IMG to fill that gap?
Well, one, you know, I would say that you know, you're focused on football, which you know is a good thing to focus on. But remember too that in Germany we have 4 or 5 other businesses that we as IMG are part of. So we have a healthy events business, we have a very healthy media business, we have a consulting business, we have the fashion business, which I mentioned to you behind the Berlin show. So we have a much broader portfolio of businesses in Germany than just the football business. We are in football in Germany. We are a partner of the Bundesliga, we're a partner of Bayern Munich, but we should be doing more. And I think one of the things that has occurred to me and to us, the more involved we have become with our joint venture partners in China and India and Turkey, the more we see the need to strengthen our footprint in Europe and in Germany, specifically to your question, because people are looking for that. They're looking for that expertise. They're looking for the connections with the clubs. By the same token, the clubs in Europe are looking for the opportunities in India and China. They want to be part of that. Huge merchandise sales opportunities in the future, if they can be part of that. And they all want to do exhibition matches in China and India. So I think it's complementary, but it certainly has reinforced our view at IMG that we need to be more competitive in football in Europe and in Germany.
The different schools of thought as to how one can raise its competitiveness in these kind of football activities. It can be just because of creativity or about your sales network and the ability to create shiny eyes with the football club. But some will say plainly it's about providing guarantee payments to the clubs that are in financial disarray to say, I will sell my soul to IMG for a few years.
Sell your soul, wow.
At least you have financial stability.
Yeah.
What is your view on that?
Well, you know, the economics ultimately are critical, and I think it on both sides, again, like the comment about the sports stars and the agents, it's a ecology, an ecological system that has to work for all parties. So it has to work for the club, it has to work for an IMG or Sport 5 or Infront or whoever it may be, or else ultimately it's going to, it will fail.
Last question. Mark McCormack is known as the granddaddy of sports. Ted Forstmann was the jet-setting playboy, deal maker. What do you want to be remembered for when you leave?
Well, you know, I think as someone who, I guess I would like to be remembered as someone who took their legacies and enriched it. And I think when I look back, you know, this is a company that's 50 years old that has had 3 leaders, effectively. McCormack for 40 years and Teddy for probably 7 years. And they each brought something different to IMG. And, you know, the entrepreneurialism of McCormack to create a business 50 years ago in sports management when nobody thought it was a business. And then on top of that, here is a guy, you know, sitting in an office in Cleveland, Ohio. And Cleveland is not the most cosmopolitan city in the world. But here's a guy sitting in an office in Cleveland, Ohio, who thinks that that business, which nobody else thinks is a business, is also an international business. So he runs around the globe creating these relationships with Wimbledon and RNA and all of these different parties, everywhere he can possibly get to. And that, you know, that set of, that head start has just created a huge opportunity for IMG, which I think was enhanced by the brilliance of Ted Forstmann to think of not only the business as it is, but the business that could be, particularly with regard to the developing world. So, you know, I think my lot in life is to follow 2 great men and to take the best of what they've done and try to make it better.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.